Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can I be heard? Am I heard? Assalamu alaikum everyone. Jazakallah khair for joining us. Alhamdulillah, this is obviously a great opportunity for all of us to spend some beneficial time. Obviously, when we're locked down in our houses, some of us might be moving around, but obviously the vast majority of us are stuck in our houses. And subhanAllah, it's a great opportunity and it's a great time for us to achieve something. It's a great time for us to achieve something. And barakallah fihum, the brothers that put this together and gave us an opportunity for all of us together and get some benefit in this time. But alhamdulillah, like we said, it's for the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we've got three sessions based out today. So I'll give a quick introduction. Obviously, we've got three sessions that we all know about. So the session that I'm starting with is based around Ulum al-Quran. Some of us might have covered it. Then we have Ustadh Khalid Itawi again after me doing Tafseer, and then Ustadh Wahi who will be doing Shamaa'il. So just to start us off, like we said, alhamdulillah, this is an opportunity and it's a chance for us to learn a bit more. Some of us might already have covered some of these subjects, but it's a chance for us to, again, maybe revise it and just get it fresh. And if there's anything new that we can learn, then this is obviously through the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But to start us off, inshallah, I know the other two ustads will follow suit, but I just want to give a quick introduction on a habit that the ulama had prior to us. They had, whenever they would start with a new group of students, then they would narrate a hadith which they call musalsal bil awwaliyah. And what they would do is they would give ijazah with a sanad back to the Sahabi radiallahu anhu, Abdullah ibn Amir ibn al-As. And this is a well-known thing, and a few of the scholars that I studied with, mashallah, they gave us ijazah in this. And like I said, it goes back to the Prophet ﷺ. So I will grant you all ijazah in this, as I was granted ijazah in it. So with my sanad, bisanadi ila Abdullah ibn Amir ibn al-As, he narrated that he had heard from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he said, "Ar-Rahimuna yarhamuhum ar-Rahman, irhamu man fil ard, yarhamkum man fis sama'." Or kama qala sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I grant you all ijazah in this, and like we said, this is the habit of the ulama to say, you know what, this is the first time I'm with this group of students or a student, and we pass this on. It's obviously a beautiful hadith for those of us that didn't understand the Arabic. Ar-Rahimuna yarhamur Rahman. So those that are merciful, then the one who is most merciful will show them mercy. Irhamu man fil ard yarhamkum man fis sama'. So have mercy upon those that are on the ground, and the one in the heavens will have mercy upon us. So may this be a opportunity for us to achieve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy. So we'll get right into it. Just a couple of housekeeping things. Obviously, everyone will be able to hear me, and everyone else's audio is muted. So obviously we can't hear each other, or I can't hear anybody. Same with the videos. But we do have a chat on the side. If anyone has any, if anyone does have any questions, I probably won't be able to. I probably won't be able to answer them on the spot. But Lu'ay, who's also on at the same time, I think Lu'ay can just send the message to everybody. And I think Lu'ay, if there's any technical difficulties, Lu'ay, I think we've given you the responsibility of taking care of that for this time being, inshallah. So inshallah, just if you have any issues, just like I said, send a question on the chat, and it'll be sent. If you have any questions about the content, inshallah, the content's very, very basic. Like we said, it is an introduction to Ulum al-Quran. But if you have any dire questions, then I'll try to go through it at the end. And if we can answer those questions, we'll try to answer those questions. So maybe best leave them to the end. If anyone has any questions, we'll try to leave 5 minutes. And inshallah, within our capacity, if we can answer them, then we'll go with that, inshallah. So just a quick introduction to what is Ulum al-Quran. So I'm assuming you all have that on the file that was just sent to you. So I'm sure I just sent it to you. And we have what is Ulum al-Quran. So basically, Ulum al-Quran, what we are going to cover over this next 10 weeks is we're going to look at the history of Ulum al-Quran, which is what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to look at the definition of the Quran, which is very important, how the Prophet ﷺ received Wahi. If I was to ask anyone what is the Quran, we start to think, well, what is it? We don't necessarily sit down and think about it theoretically. So we'll cover that today, and we'll look at what the different ulama, or some of the ulama, have said in regards to that, and how do we differentiate Quran from anything else. Traditionally, like I said, the ulama also, when it came to this science, they looked at the revelation, so how the revelation came to the Prophet ﷺ, when it came down, the reasons for the revelation, what was the first revelation, what was the last revelation, why did the Quran come down gradually, how was the Quran compiled? SubhanAllah, was it sent down to the Prophet ﷺ as a book, or was it sent down, and how did they write it? How did they compile it? Who compiled it? And these are things that sometimes, like you said, SubhanAllah, like we said, or we see, sometimes it gets criticized because people will say, well, how do we know it's the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How do we know it's the word of God? And inshallah, through this process, we'll just see how the ulama and how the Sahaba radiallahu anhum put so much effort into making sure it was exactly what was sent down to our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We'll look at the breakdown of the Quran, and other sciences that I guess are related to the Quran, in the sense of, we'll look at what are Makki verses, what are Madani verses, how do we differentiate, how do we define what a Makki verse is and what a Madani verse is, and why are they important? Look at the abrogated and abrogated verses, which is another very interesting one, whether some verses still, or their hukum still apply, don't they apply, was there anything removed from the Quran, and things like that. We'll look at the clear and ambiguous verses. We'll also look at the miraculous nature of the Quran. So how is the Quran a miracle? We say it is the miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to us. So how is it a miracle? We look at the qira'at. I know a lot of us, just looking at the names, a lot of us are Tajweed teachers, or what makes what are the different qira'at, how can we pronounce the Quran? Again, how is that miraculous? How and that sort of nature. Then we'll look at the tafsir, different. I'm not going to cover tafsir, but we'll look at how did that science evolve, the science of tafsir. And like I said, Khalid, inshallah, will cover that with us, or he's going to do some aspect of tafsir with us. But we'll look at who are the different mufassirin, and how do we get different tafsir from the Sahaba and the Tabi'in, and of the biggest scholars also. So that's generally what we will cover in this. And like I said, so to start us off, we want to look at this science, so this particular science of Ulum al-Quran. When we look at this, when we look at what was, I guess, how do we compile this? Sorry, forgive me. How do we compile this? It wasn't up into about the 4th century that we started to see a book dedicated to this science. But prior to that, some of the ulama, or some of the well-known books in this space, will attribute this ilm back to the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. And like we see when Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, in one of the narrations, he said, and he made the statement that there isn't a verse in the Quran that I don't know where it was revealed and who and on what reason it was revealed down on. SubhanAllah, he's given us that aspect of asbab al-nuzul. Why was the Quran revealed, and when was it? Was it in narration to something? Was it a question? Was it, why did Allah send a certain verse? And they had confidence in that. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum, especially Ibn Mas'ud, who we'll learn a bit more about in the weeks to come. But radiallahu anhu was one of the ulama of the Sahaba when it came to this field, and the same with Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu. But they had that confidence, and they said, he would say to his students, ask me if you have any questions about the Quran, because surely I know the tafsir and the meanings behind the majority of it, all of it. So they had this knowledge, but it wasn't, like we said, it wasn't until about the 4th century, like that information, that it was compiled into a book. It was compiled into a book in the 4th century. Generally, these sciences of some of those topics that we spoke about were separate studies. And and as we know, obviously, back then, the knowledge wasn't necessarily put into books. A lot of the knowledge back then was passed on orally. Okay, so obviously that could have been for a number of reasons. It was an oral tradition, but also maybe the paper was scarce, and people generally didn't know how to read and write as well as we do today. So that information wasn't necessarily compiled. It wasn't obviously until Alim became much more than the ulama started to pen this knowledge down. So one of the major works that we see, or one of the main works we see, is from Imam al-Zarkashi, rahimahullah, who came, I think it was in the 4th century after Hijrah. Oh no, sorry, a bit later, but it was in the 4th century that one of the ulama put it together. But Al-Burhan fi Ulum al-Quran by al-Zarkashi is one of the bigger books, and the most well-known books. The book sits at about 1,200 pages. And what he did, is he put all these sciences together, and all these topics that we're talking about, he put them all together into a book. And a bit after him, we see, which is I believe is maybe and a lot of ulama subhanAllah speak very highly of this book, which is Al-Itqan fi Ulum al-Quran by Imam al-Suyuti. His book was a bit shorter. When I say a bit shorter, I got to about 830 something pages in Arabic. And subhanAllah, he detailed it. It was when we started Al-Itqan fi Ulum al-Quran, just because it's such a beautiful book. I remember he gives his introduction and he said Imam al-Suyuti was a giant, and he's well known for, again, they were both Egyptian scholars, but he's well known for another book which is Tafseer al-Jalalain, and he did a very beautiful tafsir, mashallah, with one of his teachers, which is also named Jalaluddin. And he had this eagerness of what is Ulum al-Quran. He didn't understand, well, how come no one has put these sciences together? And he went searching for it. And after asking his teachers, or one of his teachers, he found very minimal until he came across this book, Al-Burhan. And he said it was an absolutely beautiful book. He said, but he wanted to make it a bit more not comprehensive in its size, but he gave a bit more, detail, and he made it so concise that Allah yahfadhu, we still utilize the book till today, and it's used as the main reference. So if anyone ever gets a chance, I haven't. There would be an English translation on it, but you can find the Arabic translation absolutely anywhere. Some of the more, and then I guess the two Arabic references that the ulama go back to when it comes to these sciences. And what, like we said, what they did is they combined all the opinions of the ulama when it came to this, and they put it there. So it's a bit of a scholarly book. So when you read through it, it can get you can get a bit lost in it, especially if you haven't been introduced to the science. But what I also like, and we've covered slightly, is from an English perspective, there's three really good books that have put this knowledge together. They can get into a bit of depth, and maybe some of us that have looked at this subject have seen. There's Ahmed van Denver's book, which is basically called Ulum al-Quran, which is very concise. It's not very big at all. You could read it in a couple of days. Again, he gives a similar to what we're doing now, a very swift, I guess, very basic introduction into what Ulum al-Quran is. Sheikh Dr. Yasir Qadi also wrote a book. It's a bit, again, these books are a bit older, but he wrote a beautiful book on it. He called it an Introduction to the Science of the Quran. That's a bit deeper, but again, they've made it easy for us. And also Mawlana Taqi Uthman, who's also another well-known scholar in the Western world, in the English-speaking world. They've all written books in this science. So as we can see, I know from Sheikh Yasir Qadi and Taqi Uthman, they're two very influential scholars, and they've put effort into actually writing a comprehensive book on this. So it shows us the importance of this ilm. It's not just a ilm. It gets overseen, I guess, generally by a lot of us, because the juicier topics are your tafsir or your tajweed or your these sort of topics. So subhanallah, but they showed the importance of it. Without this knowledge and the knowledge that's within these, we can't go into those, and as we'll see. Another beautiful Arabic work on this it's a poem by Abdul Aziz al-Zamzami, and he wrote a poem called Manzum al-Zamzami, which was based on, subhanallah, one of Imam Suyuti's first books in this. Imam Suyuti, hafidhahullah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward him, Allah yarhamu. He wrote a book first called Al-Nuqayah, and then he went on to Al-Ithqan, which became, so Imam Zamzami, rahmatullah alayh, he wrote a poem on it, and maybe some of us have seen that, which is a beautiful poem. Not very long, I think it's about 100 couplets. So subhanallah, it's in Arabic. Shouldn't be too hard to find a translation on that. So that's a basic introduction to that. A basic introduction to this ulum. We're now going to look at the definition of the Quran. Like I said, I think the majority of us here are Quran teachers. And this is a bit upskilling. But how did the ulama define the Quran? What is the Quran? You know, if you ask the general person, I think generally, just from asking general people, you ask them, what is Al Quran? A lot of us will just say, oh, it's the book of Allah. Or it's the speech of Allah. It's a bit problematic because isn't the Injil the speech of Allah? Isn't the Torah the speech of Allah? Aren't these other books that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down also the speech of Allah? So what is the definition to what makes the Quran? It's the miracle of Allah sent to all mankind. It is the perfect speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what defines it, what makes this thing, we as Muslims, we believe it is the greatest miracle, which we're going to look at. It is the greatest miracle sent to mankind ever. So how do we define it? And how do we actually start to get attached to it and understand what it is for what it is? You guys have a definition that I'm going to read it in Arabic, but the definition we have is by from At-Tibyan fi Ulum al-Quran, which is by a scholar, subhanallah, that is still alive. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve him. He's a bit older at the moment. He's Imam al-Sabuni, who I think he's close to his death, on his deathbed. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve him. But we've taken this definition. So Hajj Belal has given us this definition. There's many definitions, and a lot of ulama have gone into different definitions. Hajj Belal found this one appropriate, and I also find this one appropriate because it's comprehensive. What we also just need to keep in mind, when we say there's different definitions of the Quran, they don't contradict each other. Okay, as we're going to see, the definitions don't contradict each other. In some of the aspects we're going to see, but some would say, oh no, that aspect definitely needs to be in it, while others will say, well, maybe that aspect doesn't really need to be in it. In one of the poems that I just mentioned, Zamzami's poem, he said a couple of the most important aspects, which is very basic. He said the most important, or the basic important aspects of the definition of Quran is that it was sent down to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it's in the Arabic language. He says that's basic, but then we need to understand it's a bit more than that. So from the definition that we have, Allah yahfadhu, Imam Sabuni says, هو كلام الله المعجز المنزل على خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين بواسية الآمين جبريل عليه السلام المكتوب في المصاحف المنقول إلينا بالتواتر المتعبد بتلاوته المبدوء بسورة الفاتحة المختتم بسورة الناس. So I read it quickly. We're going to break it down. Okay, so we're going to break it down and inshallah give a bit of attention to this. He says, subhanallah, the first he says, it is the kalam of Allah. It is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not just the word of Allah, but he adds another word there. He says it is the miraculous word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. the miraculous word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And obviously once we finish the definition, we're going to say, why does it add all these aspects? It's not just kalamullah. Why isn't it just kalamullah? Because if we said it's kalamullah, Hadith Qudsi is kalamullah. But it's the miraculous word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The exact word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every ayah, every letter, every harakah is there. And every single, some of the ulama in this page, they said every ayah of the Quran is a miracle. Maybe I can't see that miracle. Maybe I don't understand that miracle. But every ayah of the Quran is a miracle. So imagine this word. Imagine the whole compilation of the Quran. It is miraculous. Why? Because it's the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends something down to us, He sends it in the best of forms. Okay, and obviously the Quran was sent down to who? It was sent down to the Arabs, to the Prophet ﷺ, but in the Arabs. So then he goes on and he says, which was revealed to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, or the final Prophet, the seal of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, through who? Through the trustworthy Jibreel, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes it in the Quran, the trustworthy Jibreel. It is preserved in the Mus'hafs, which we're going to see. It has reached us through multiple transmission, which some of us have studied a bit of hadith, which it's mutawatir. And as we go on, we're going to say, how is it mutawatir? SubhanAllah. From mutawatir transition, its recitation is worship. And it begins with Surah Al-Fatiha and it ends with Surah Al-Nas. Again, so it's the miraculous speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which was revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam by the trustworthy Jibreel alayhi salam. It's preserved in the Mus'hafs. It has reached us through multiple transition. Its recitation is a worship. It begins with Surah Al-Fatiha and ends with Surah Al-Nas. I'm going to go over why each one of them is put in there. Another translation I have is it came to us in the Arabic language. And like I said, the Zamzami also said the same thing. He said it's Arabic. Why? And a lot of past scholars were against the idea of us even attempting to translate the Quran, because its preservation and its miracle is in the Arabic language. So that's something that we don't have here. That I guess is worth noting, that it's in the Arabic language. Like I said, some of the scholars said that if it's a translation of the Quran, then it's not Arabic. If it's a translation of the Quran, then it's not a Quran. So if it's in another language, then it's not necessarily the Quran. It's an indicator of the meaning of what is in the Quran. So he says, it's a miraculous speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is the speech of Allah. It is the uncreated speech of Allah. I'm not going to go into that, but it's the uncreated speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which was revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The Quran is whatever the Quran is associated with, that thing becomes beautiful. That thing becomes holy to us. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, this is the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Quran, and we always say, if I have a letter from someone that I adore, as someone that I love, today we don't necessarily use letters. If I have a text message from someone that I adore and I'm away, I'm guilty of this. If I go away and you get a message from your loved ones, whether it's your wife or your family, your parents, your kids, whatever, that time you're not communicating anything, you go back on those messages and you read them and you get enlightened by that. Why? Because I love that person, I'm attached to that person. And if they've sent me something, then I want to know what they said, and I'm excited by, that person sent me a message. If it's someone important, then I go back and I read that. If it's an email, it's a work email, anything that's important to us, then I go back and I analyze that letter, I analyze that speech. Imagine the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's beautiful, and I'm not going to get, but when they look at, for instance, a piece of paper. Now I've got a piece of paper here. A piece of paper is a piece of paper. It's a piece of paper. It's not worth much. It's a blank piece of paper. Here, I've got it on the floor. I don't mind if it's on the floor. The moment I write a verse of the Quran on it, can I throw it on the floor? And SubhanAllah, and we see around the world, if someone disrespects the Quran, and SubhanAllah, we see sometimes there are people that don't even know what the meaning of the Quran is. They don't even know Arabic. But as soon as someone disrespects the Quran or throws it on the floor, I traveled the subcontinent, subhanAllah, and you see the respect they have for the Quran. And I guarantee, majority of them don't even know what's in them. They don't know the meaning of the Quran. They don't know Arabic. But the way that they hold the Mus'haf, it's the most beloved thing to them. If they're walking past and there's a shoe rack, they hold it up. It's just, they hold it dear to them. Why? Because that's the speech of my most beloved. And he sent it down to his most beloved. That's why I should love the Quran. And he says it was sent through the most beloved of angels. Allahu Akbar. Jibreel alayhi salam. And this combats the idea that, you know what, we all know the certain religions used to mock Jibreel. No, Jibreel is not the one that sends down the revelation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it clear in the Quran. It's him. And he's the trustworthy one. He's the trustworthy of my angels. And it's preserved in the Mus'hafs. So the Quran that we have, that's the Quran. And it's preserved. The way that it's written in those Mus'haf, we have different calligraphy or maybe different ways it's written, but the way that it's written in the Mus'haf is the way it's written everywhere. And it's reached us through a mutawatir tradition. What mutawatir means is that the compilation of the Quran, we'll get into it, every ayah had to have been impossible for it to be fabricated. Impossible. And what we say by mutawatir is that so many people, so many of the Sahaba witnessed it, that it's impossible to make it a lie. And you know what, Allah subhanAllah, one of the miraculous natures of the Quran is there's one copy, and you pick up any Quran and you recite to any Hafiz, no one will ever disagree upon what is in the Mus'haf. And you look at the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, no one ever, there was little disputes on maybe the compilation of the Quran and little things like that, but they are all submitted to the Quran that we have. That you didn't get any rebel groups to say, no, that's not the Quran like we see in other religions or other books. SubhanAllah, the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He promises He's the one, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises His Prophet, He's the one that is going to preserve it. Its recitation is like worship. No other science can you study, and its recitation is worship. And we all know the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he said that if every letter that you recite, then you will get 10 hasanat. And he said, I don't say to you that Alif Lam Mim is one letter, but Alif is a letter, Lam is a letter, and Mim is a letter. And we're not going to get into the translation of that hadith, but it shows us that even a recitation of a letter in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ready to give us immense reward for it. So Allahu Akbar, its recitation is a worship, and he found that worthy of adding in this. Why? Because maybe if I recite a hadith, it's not maybe a worship, it could be a study. SubhanAllah. And he said, it begins with Surah Al-Fatiha and it ends with Surah Al-Nas. You're probably thinking, that's common sense. Why do you have to mention it starts with Surah Al-Fatiha and it ends with Surah Al-Nas? We know that. But SubhanAllah, when we compile the Quran, we look at some of the other Sahaba, there was a bit of, we wouldn't say ikhtilaf in the sense of they made anyone blameworthy, but where does the Quran end and that sort of thing. So he found it worthy to say it starts with Surah Al-Fatiha, ends with Surah Al-Nas. Why this is important? It removes for us its comparison to a number of other things. It removes its comparison. Allah's speech is the ultimate. Allah's speech is the ultimate. So it removes to us the speech of other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So not to take away from the Prophet ﷺ, but the speech of the Prophet ﷺ isn't necessarily the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The greatest mu'jiza is the Quran. So then it differentiates between the other kitab. Then we also know we have Hadith Qudsi, which we'll break down in a moment, but we also have Hadith Qudsi. We also have Hadith Qudsi, which is, how do we define that? Is Hadith Qudsi the word of Allah? And then we've got to look into it from that aspect. So that's his basic definition. That's his basic definition of the, I wouldn't call it basic, sorry, but that's a definition of the Quran. Like I said, you'll be able to find others, and we've come across others, but this one is a worthy tradition. And like I said, other definitions do not, conflict with any of these. One might add, like he's added Jibreel alayhi salam. The other ones don't add Jibreel alayhi salam. He hasn't added Arabic. Others might add it in Arabic. And like I said, some of the others, they said it's the miraculous speech of Allah. And another noteworthy one would be it starts with the Fatiha and ends with Surah An-Nas. So we know it's what we have in the mushafs that we have, and a lot of us actually teach, or alhamdulillah are connected to whatever extent. Why do we call it the Quran? I'm not going to take any question. I don't know if anyone's. Why do we call it the Quran? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is named the Quran, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has also given a handful of other names. I think some of the ulama have noted over 30 names. And some of them have added even over 90 names I read the other day. But some of them will take the attribute of the Quran and name it. But the direct names of the Quran is the Quran or Al-Kitab, which is mentioned numerous times in the Quran, which is Al-Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Al-Quran or Al-Kitab. And some other names that we have there is Al-Furqan, the citation. We have Al-Shifa, we have Al-Shifa, and we have Al-Rahmah, So there's some other names that the Quran is also known by, but I think overwhelmingly the first two that we have there are the most common names used by the ulama and by all of us generally, Al-Quran and Al-Kitab. So they don't in any way, I guess, contradict each other, but they're different names for the miraculous book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Excellent. Well, and like I said, we have Al-Dhikr is another name, Al-Tanzil, Al-Tanzil, which are other names. So that gets us to the end of that. I wanted to cover a couple of other aspects with us, inshallah. I've got about 13 minutes. Excellent. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. What is the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So what is the difference between, why did we define the Quran as that? What are some of the differences between the next most common aspect of a speech of Allah, not the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but the next most common thing that we hold holy. So the Quran is obviously the direct speech of Allah. We have the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we have our 6 books. But amongst that, there's different levels of a hadith, and the most noteworthy would be Hadith Qudsi. So what's Hadith Qudsi? A Hadith Qudsi is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said something, but it's not Quran. So we're going to understand what's the difference between what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said is not Quran. Let's look at the difference. So if we're going to look at Quran, so if you, I know you guys don't have it there, but if we're going to break it up into 2 columns, we're going to have Quran in one column and Hadith Qudsi in the other column, okay? What is the first aspect? We're going to break it up into 5 aspects, or 5, I guess, categories that we're going to look at the difference between the comparison of Quran and Hadith Qudsi. The first one is Al-Quran. In Al-Quran, the meaning and the wording is all from Allah Ta'ala. The meaning and the wording. So when we read the Quran, that's the exact speech of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Exact speech in every letter, in every harakah, like we mentioned. Hadith Qudsi is a bit different. It is the speech, its meaning is from Allah. So it's the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Its meaning is from Allah. However, the wording is from the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And we've given an example over here. It's like saying, for instance, what is the Quran? Let's give an example. We're not comparing it to this, but just for our understanding. It's like a king wants to pass on a message. So he says to the messenger, this is a letter, and he writes the exact letter. This letter, please pass it on to whoever he's passing it on to, word for word. The messenger takes a piece of paper and he says, this is it. I'm a deliverer of it. I'm not translating anything. I'm passing it on. That's the Quran. Hadith Qudsi is when the king says to one of his messengers, I want you to pass so and so a message. Get this man or get this person or get whoever to understand 1, 2, 3. I don't care how you put it. This is the message. Get them to understand it. So the message is from the king. So Hadith Qudsi, the message is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but the way it's expressed could be from Jibreel or could be from the Prophet ﷺ. To us it comes from Allah, from the Prophet ﷺ, but Jibreel could have expressed it to the Prophet ﷺ in a certain way, or the Prophet ﷺ could have expressed it to us in a certain way. And that's one aspect of how we differentiate Quran and Hadith Qudsi. The next one is Quran, like we said, is mutawatir. Every single ayah of it is impossible to fabricate because of how many times it had been witnessed by the Sahaba. It was impossible to fabricate. Whereas with a Hadith Qudsi, it could be mutawatir, but it's not limited to mutawatir. Okay, we could have Hasan, or we could even have weak narrations of a Hadith Qudsi. So that I guess differentiates it and stops it from being Al-Quran. The recitation of the Quran is a worship, whereas it's a worship that can be recited in prayer. The recitation of the Quran it has to be recited in prayer. I can't now all of a sudden I'm praying and I want to recite a Hadith Qudsi in Arabic. No, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. I can only recite the Quran in my salat. Another beautiful thing, subhanAllah, that they've mentioned is it contains a challenge. The Quran contains a challenge, and we'll go into it a bit in the coming weeks. It contains a challenge, whereas the hadith don't contain a challenge. The Prophet ﷺ never said to anyone, I challenge you to produce words like me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala challenges all mankind to produce a surah, to produce a ayah, produce 10 ayahs, or whatever it is, produce something like the Quran. And obviously we know this challenge is not just for the eloquent speakers at the time, but it's for all mankind. And we're still yet to find anyone that can produce something like the Quran or a surah of the Quran. And the last one is the Quran is directly attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whereas the hadith is attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we keep that. Excellent. So the Quran, like we said, is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in wording and in meaning. And it was sent down by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam received the Wahi. So I wanted to go, I'm going to about 8 minutes, I think. I just really quickly want to go into what is Wahi. What is Wahi? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word obviously in its different ways in the Quran. And the Ulum and the ulama have given us, I think, five ways of Wahi. And then we're going to look at the Wahi of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The first one is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The definition of Wahi means something that's quick and swift. Linguistically, it means a quick inspiration. So something that was received quickly and swiftly. And it's like a secret. A Wahi is a secret. It's like a sir. It's a secret that no one else can see, or no one else heard. If that makes sense. So it's something, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is passing on something to somebody that no one else can see, no one else can hear, and it happens very quickly. And we've got five examples of this. An animal, the ulama break it down into 5. It's animal instinct. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the example of the bee when he says he has inspired the bee, or your Lord has inspired the bee to build yourself a house in the mountain and trees and what people construct. Then feed on all kinds of fruit and follow the ways made easy for you by your Lord. And that we find in Surah Al-Nahl, verses 68 to 69. And subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing us He gives wahi, He gives inspiration to the animals. We've got the example over here of the bee. Many other examples. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has inspired the animals to do as they do. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can also, what we call human intuition. I think the perfect example of this would be the mother of Musa alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and we gave her inspiration. You know, got this mother that has got this child. What would, when the ulama, they go into this, what would inspire a woman The most beloved thing to her is her kid is a few days old, she's still suckling it. You know what? I'm going to put it in a river. Doesn't make sense. It actually doesn't make sense. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's a form of the wahi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He gives something within the human being to say, do this. Again, no one else can see it, no one else can explain it. It doesn't mean it's revelation or that person received the Quran, no. But it's an internal instinct. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like we said, gave that to the mother of Musa. It's not also very, again, we're looking at the definition of this word wahi. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the shaitan can also give you wahi. Not like the wahi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but he can give you whispering, which again, it goes back to the definition of wahi. Let's not get confused. Oh, shaitan gives wahi, no, the definition of wahi. Okay, so when the shaitan and the shaitan inspired their friends to dispute with you. So the shaitan can give also waswasa to people. So this is a form of wahi. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the word also means a command. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and when I inspired wa awhaytu the disciples of the to believe in me and my messengers. And that's Surah Al-Ma'idah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, and He inspired us to do certain things. And in this example He gave, He inspired the companions of Isa alayhi salam to follow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His messenger Isa alayhi salam. And its commands given to the angels. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also gives wahi to the angels. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and your Lord revealed wahi to the angels. I am with you. Give the believers firmness. I shall put terror into the hearts of the disbelievers in the Surah Al-Anfal. The Prophet ﷺ, we see that it contains swift and apparent communication. So it's a direct communication from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or it means it's a direct communication. Types of wahi, and I'm going to finish off with this. I've got 3 minutes. Types of wahi to the Prophet ﷺ. So the first one is, or two categories. The first category is without an intermediary. And the perfect example of this, and we see in the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, which narrates to us that prior to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, I'm just quickly going over this. She says that in preparation for his revelation, the first revelation, he would see true dreams. And we know in another hadith that true dreams are 1/40th or so of revelation to the Anbiya alayhi salam. Another example is the dream of the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. So he had a dream, and we all know it, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered him to sacrifice his son. So that was a wahi from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the Anbiya. It's different to the wahi that we heard about Musa, because these are Anbiya. So when they see something, it's a direct revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do so and so. We know the response of his son, that Allah commanded you to. Yes, He commanded you to. So it's a direct inspiration that in my dream I've seen something as a prophet. So because I've seen that, he took that as a revelation, or it is a revelation. However, that the Prophet ﷺ, when we look at Quran, the Prophet ﷺ, his dreams weren't Quran. So if he received a revelation, or he received a wahi in his dream, it wasn't considered Quran. I think he would have woken up, or he would have been in a state of awakenness. Then we have, the direct speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, however, from behind a curtain, as occurred with the Prophet Musa alayhi salam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He spoke to Musa alayhi salam, that was a direct speech. There was no intermediary. But however, there was a curtain, whether it was a curtain of light, whatever type of curtain, there was a curtain between him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but he received that direct speech in the best form that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. Allahu a'lam. And the second type is with an intermediary. And that intermediary in the form of the Quran is Jibreel alayhi salam. So the angel came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and was not seen by others. So two forms, where the angel was not seen. So he'll come and he'll sit with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he'll reveal the Quran to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but no one else knew what was happening. There were signs, like maybe he started to sweat and he got heavy, and he said, the Prophet would say there was a ringing of a bell, and he knew that revelation was coming, and it felt very painful, that sort of thing. But no one else could see Jibreel when he brought this. Another form would be that Jibreel would come in the form of a man, and this type of revelation was easier upon the Prophet ﷺ than previous times. So Allahu A'lam, they're the revelations of the Quran. Like we said, what we went through the types of Wahi, we gave 5, just to quickly recap that. The animal instinct, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspires upon animals, human intuition, but also the shaitan can give us inspiration. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from the whisperings of shaitan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the word can also mean a command, when I commanded the companions of Isa to follow or to believe, and when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands the angels, He gives them wahi to fill whatever task they have that needs to be filled. And like we said, there's 2 types of revelation or wahi that comes upon the Prophet ﷺ, that which is direct, not to the Prophet ﷺ, to any to any prophet, one that is direct, or one that is direct with no intermediary, and one that has an intermediary. So the 2 without intermediary, my English is shocking, forgive me, is a true dream, like we're saying for the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, and a direct speech which Musa alayhi salam received. And then the other one is when the angel came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and like we said, only Jibreel alayhi salam ever brought down the Quran to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this could have been, like we said, with other people witnessing Jibreel alayhi salam, and other times where no one witnessed Jibreel alayhi salam. So they're the 2 types. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for us. My time's up. I've gone 1 minute over. Forgive me, Ustadh Khalid. Jazakallahu khairan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for us. If there's any questions, if there are any questions, I'm happy to. Otherwise, I think we just